You know, everybody in the world feels like a nobody going nowhere at some time in your life. Some people have some experiences that are very, very painful, and it's more acute for them, but we all get stuck at times. Sometimes, you drive in your car, and, your car seems to know its own way home or its own way to work, and you don't really have to concentrate, you don't really have to think, and your mind begins to wander, and you start thinking like, man, this is not where I thought I was going to be in this job. This is not, we're into this marriage like 16, 18 years. This is not my expectations. I feel like I'm on this treadmill, and where I thought I would be, what I thought my life would be like. And then you just start asking questions like, does my life really matter? Am I going to be single all the rest of my life? I mean, I thought by now I would own a home. I thought by now I would really be here in my career, and I'm here. And then, some circumstances happen, and this is just normal, and it's human, and we go to these dark times now and then, and for some of you, it's more than now and then. If I was gone, probably no one would ever miss me. I mean, maybe a few family members, maybe for a couple weeks. And then you just sort of go down these dark trails, and something inside of you and inside of me desperately wants to be a somebody. We're made to be a somebody. And like what you just watched on the video, we usually will figure out some way to try and make ourselves a somebody. And whether it's by performance or art or music or intelligence or relationships, or sometimes we go to really not healthy places like an eating disorder or an addiction, but something to fill that void. And that happens to everybody in little windows, and for some people, for big windows. The other time it happens isn't just when you're stuck. The other time it happens is when you you sort of hit the bullseye or you strike it rich. And I carry around an article that many years ago, it was a 1999 Santa Cruz Mercury article, and I mean, literally, I have it still on paper. And it's an article, the names of these 20-something and early 30 entrepreneurs who hit it. The article says, almost weekly in the Silicon Valley, 20-somethings sell their companies and make a few $100 million rich beyond their wildest dreams. Yet despite their wealth, they're likely to face a universal conundrum. Humans are wired to strive for goals, but reaching them can be disorienting. Therapists see successful young entrepreneurs asking themselves soul-searching questions, some for the first time, about what they're doing with their lives. They experience, and then quotation marks, the void. And then it talks about a lady who is a psychotherapist in the Silicon Valley who sits and talks to people that have, quote, everything and feel like a nobody going nowhere because they thought that if I ever did that, well then. And for reasons I don't know, just in the last probably 15 years, God has orchestrated my life in some places around the world where I just end up sitting down with a lot of people like that. And what I would tell you is, see, they don't have this false hope that if someday, some way I could do this, then I'll be a somebody going somewhere. They've kind of hit it. And some of the wealthiest, richest, most powerful people, former professional athletes, people that own amazing companies, people that have a house here, another house here, a G4, a G5, I've sat across from in the last 15 years, and they just begin in a safe place to tell me, I feel like a nobody, going nowhere. And everybody wants to be me, but if they only knew. I've had a few seasons like that, but the most difficult one for me was a season between 1988 and 1990. I'd made a 5-year commitment. It was the very first time I was a pastor, and it was a journey. We started out with these 35 people, and I made a 5-year commitment, so about 6 years in, about 400, 500 people begin to come to this little church in this town of 3,000, and I love them and they love me, But I went to seminary, I went to graduate school, then I went to seminary, and I wanted to be a missionary. And then God said, no, you can't be a missionary, but you get to be a pastor. And so I'm in year number 6 of a 5-year commitment. You do the math. Now, I grew up in the suburbs, right? So, I mean, I'm in this town. They didn't have a stoplight. They only had 2 restaurants, no fast food places. This is like pickup trucks with guns in the back. And I got to where, I mean, they really helped me. I really loved them, but it was like, okay, those are the training wheels. I'm ready, God. Year 6, year 7, year 8. And those last 2.5 years, I remember driving around sort of mindlessly going, are you kidding me? I went to 2 years of graduate school and 5 years of seminary, and I'm in a town of 3,000 people, and God's forgot my name? This is it? This is like, are you kidding? And then I would get really discouraged, and I would think, you know, what about all those dreams I thought you put in my heart? Did I really hear you? Is it just me? Is there something wrong with me? I mean, my life was here, and my dreams and expectations were here, and the gap was like, there's no way. And I remember just driving around, and some of us that are sort of highly focused and probably dysfunctional. I remember I started counting all the churches within a mile or a mile and a half. There were 16 churches within like a half a mile to a mile and a half. And I thought, God, if these people want to hear about you, this is Texas. There's churches everywhere. I want to go where it's cutting edge. I've been overseas. I want to go where, and I mean, it was just nothing. I felt like a nobody going nowhere. Question for you. When's the last time you felt that way? And what do you do? See, the problem is that we think it's about our circumstances. I'm going to suggest it's primarily an issue of perspective. If you'll look on the very front of your notes, I'm going to tell you a very brief, true story, and I put it here because God used this unusual experience to help me sort of come out of my poor me, I'm a nobody, I'm going nowhere, my life doesn't count. If I died tomorrow, no one would care. You know, personal pity party. And it was about that time we lived in Texas, and my oldest boys were only 10 or 11, so it was many, many years ago. And we heard this huge dog barking, I mean growling and barking, and then we heard this patter right to our house, and then we heard this, let me in, let me in, let me in. And it was a winter night, only about 7 o'clock, but pitch dark. And so it sounded like Michael, one of my kids' friends. And so I get to the door, and it's like, this kid's going to die. I open the door, and I flip on the light, and Michael's there, and his eyes are dilated, and help me, help me, help me. There's this dog, can I come inside? So he jumps inside. I'd flipped on the porch light, and then we looked behind Michael. And so help me, I don't know if this dog had like really big lungs, but I'm telling you, that dog might have been this big, you know, and maybe this long. And I mean, this kid's going, thank you so much, thank you so much. And then we all turn around and we look at this ferocious, you know, Doberman pincer, you know, except it's not. It's like a Chihuahua with lungs. And we just all start laughing. I mean, we crack up. Look at the bottom of your notes, however. A ferocious bark, a pounding door, a terrified child, a little light, and a timeless principle. Our perceptions determine our responses. If you perceive yourself to be a nobody going nowhere, it doesn't matter what's really true of you. Ask Robin Williams. Think of that. Was he a nobody? And yet, at a moment in time, in a window of time, like all of us, when you get discouraged or depressed, you lose perspective, you start looking at life like this, and pretty soon your marriage isn't any good, your life isn't any good, your life doesn't. People who commit suicide, the great majority of them, are really balanced people who allow their perspective to shift. They get very discouraged, often get clinically depressed, and pretty soon all they can see is the dark. And it's not that their life is meaningless. It's not that they don't bring something to the table. It's not that they're not successful. But their view of themselves, their perception determines their response. And we're going to look at 5 specific things that we need to remember from God's Word that literally is going to do this for you. Flick on the porch light of truth into your soul so that on those moments when you feel like a nobody going nowhere, or in today when you feel that way, it'll give you perspective. And you might even be able to kind of laugh and say, wow, what was I thinking? My life has value, it has purpose, it has direction. I'm really a somebody, not because of what other people think or what I think, but because of what God thinks and who He made. You ready to dig in? 5 things to remember. The first thing to remember is God knows you. He knows you. This is written by David. He says, "Oh Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You're familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely. Oh Lord," literally Yahweh, Jehovah, "you hem me in, behind and before. You've laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's too lofty for me to attain." Now, pull out a pen if you have it. Do a little Bible study here. I want you to just see how many words talk about how deeply, intimately God knows all your actions, all your thoughts, all your motives. Just as we start line 1, circle the word searched. Then the next one, circle the word know me. Then circle the word know on the first line. Go to line 2, perceive, circle that. Go to the next line, discern, circle that. And then go to the end, He's familiar, circle that. To the next line you go, it says you know it completely, circle you know. To the next line, you hem me in. It's a picture of God's before, He's behind you. And then put a line under, laid your hand upon me. This word is used for God when He puts His hand of favor upon someone. What He says in this passage, and by the way, the word know here is not a word of intellectual cognitive knowledge. It's not a factual knowledge like there's this deist, impersonal God who knows all things and there's this huge database someplace and He knows everything about every person. That's not the picture. This is the picture of a very personal covenant God. And He uses it's a literary term called a merism. When I sit down, when I rise up, that's all your activities. All of your thoughts, all of your motives. He gives you this picture from beginning when you get up to when you go to bed. When you have a thought that's germinating, even before it comes out of your mouth, He knows it. Now think of this. God personally, intimately knows every thought, every action, every dream. He knows your past. He knows what frustrates you. He knows where you're most tempted. He knows where you're vulnerable. He knows the private thoughts that not even your best friend or your mate has ever heard. He knows your deepest fears. He knows you more than you know yourself. So here's the application. You are understood by God. What you do, why you do it, when you do it, how you do it, what you currently are frustrated by, what makes you crazy, the past that has your regrets, the fears that dominate your future, He completely knows you. And here's the thing, He understands. See, sometimes we feel like a nobody, and what we don't understand is God has a really big agenda. And some of the dreams and some of the expectations, some of the times when you feel the most like a nobody, God is doing some of His deepest work. When you feel that, I have to tell you, during those 2 years, I talked to God a lot. I talked to God a lot about this and about that and how come about this and this is what I really want. And what was happening is He was weaning me from my personal agendas and my stuff and my arrogance and my pride that this will make me a someone. That I can't be in this little church. I got to be in a big church. This little town, I need to be in a big town. And what He was doing was saying, you know, Chip, until you get to the point where you understand this journey really isn't about you and your agenda and what you think will make you a someone until you begin to understand that because I made you, you're already a someone. And what I want to do is I'm glad to give you some of the desires of your heart, but the calling that God has on your life requires a character that needs to be developed. And some of the most frustrating times that you have that you're pushing up against and you're frustrated by, and you have this imaginary thought that if I could get that, or if I could achieve that, or if I could finally get married, or if our marriage would get over the hump, or if we could finally have kids, or if we could, and we have the if then, if then, if then, if then. Well, just look in the rearview mirror. How many of the old, if I had this, then, wow, everything would be great. Did that work? Or do you just change the if then, right? See, God wants you to know, here's the thing. You can talk to him in a different way. He understands. But that line, here's his desire. He has his hand upon you. Believe me, he wants far better for you than you want for you. He understands what you need. You think and I think this would make me happy. This would make me fulfilled. This is what I really need. Wait a second. God knows all things about you, but he knows all things about all things and all people. He sees the beginning from the end. He's all-knowing. He's outside of time. He's omnipresent. He's all-powerful. And you're his child. He understands. And so David's response is literally this phrase, it's too wonderful. Literally, it's too overwhelming. It's just too overwhelming. It's too extraordinary. And on the one hand, it's like, it's awesome and it's wonderful, but two things kind of happen. It's great to be understood, but the moment you think someone sees everything, the other response is, I'm not sure I want to be around that person because it's very revealing. And so David's reaction first is it's wonderful, and then he realizes, you know something, there's part of our humanness, I want to run away from God. Now, I don't know about you, but you probably think pastors get up every day and go, oh, man, I just love the Bible. I love God. I just, Chip, he probably, memorizes 5 verses in the morning just for breakfast, and, prays for a couple hours a day, never has any problems, and, I don't know about you. There's times, I kind of have a little quick prayer time, and I sense the need to talk a little bit more deeper, and I just go, I don't want to talk to God. I don't want to read the Bible. In fact, there's times where, don't take this personally, I don't want to be around other Christians. When I'm dealing with something, and sometimes I'm not even sure what I'm dealing with, but sometimes it's a little unforgiving spirit, or sometimes it's an attitude, or sometimes I'm frustrated with something or someone, here's what I know. If I really sit down and have a long talk with God, he's probably going to get there with me. And isn't that true of all of us? People that you maybe have a little issue with, I don't know about you, I don't want to hang around with them then. And so David goes from, it's wonderful that I'm understood and you know everything, but even if you're for me, I'm not ready to handle this. So the temptation is to run away from God. The temptation is, I'll dig my own well. I'll make my own way. I know what's better for me. And so David says, not only does God know you, God is pursuing you. Because in our humanness, we do run away. That's our human reaction. He says, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? And then he gives these sort of hypothetical, the height and depth and length and breadth. He goes, if I go to heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there, then notice the grace. Your hand will guide me. God wants to give you direction even when you don't want it. Your right hand will hold fast of me. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me and the light will become night around me. See, those are times, have you ever had one of those? The darkness will hide me. I think the Robin Williams and the super depressed people at times, the darkness just covers you up. I am a nobody. There's no use. Why should I live? It doesn't work. This marriage will never work. These kids are a disaster. My singleness is making me crazy. This job is dead end. I've lost my house. Forget the retirement. I was going to retire, and then there was a .com, then the dot bust, and the dot, I'm making like 1% on my investments. I've extended my retirement 5 years and 10 years, and nothing matters. When the darkness starts to overcome you, notice what he says. And even the light, the things you thought were going to be good, becomes darkness. He goes, for darkness is as light to you. And again, he uses this grammatical picture. He says, there's part of me in my humanness knowing that you know everything about me. I want to run away, but if I went as high as heaven, you're there. If I went, the depths, literally, the Hebrew word is in Shoel, the innermost part of the earth, you were there. If I went on the wings of dawn, farthest east, farthest west, you're there. And basically what he says is God doesn't just know us and understand everything. He's pursuing us, but why? Because he wants to guide you. Your hand will guide me. And then that picture, isn't it a great picture? Your right hand will take hold of me. This is, if you walk out a little bit later, you'll see moms and dads and some grandparents with toddlers. And what do? They have their little right hand, right? And they walk with them because they want to make sure that they're going to be okay. And God says, that's what I want to do with you. I want you to know that I understand your frustration. I hear, I know, but I'm pursuing you. And write this down. You're wanted by God. See, we get really feeling bad because we feel at times that no one really wants me. Maybe they want my money, or maybe they like me for my looks, or maybe they like me because I can produce stuff. But who really cares about me? Just me. Not what I can do, not how I perform, not how I look, not what I have, not where I live, not my zip code. Who would really care about me? When you start feeling like a nobody, you can be super successful out there, but what you feel like is, yeah, you get used, and they like what you can do. You know what God says? He goes, I want you. I'm pursuing you. In fact, so much of Jesus' life models and pictures this. There was a time when the disciples were walking across a unique place, and they were going through a little part of the land called Samaria, and culturally, Samaritans and Jews were in great hostility toward one another, and the disciples had gone into town to get some food, and Jesus, being fully man but being fully human, was very tired, and he sat down near this well. And a woman came out to get water, and she came out at this time rather than the normal time because she had a checkered past. She had been married 5 times and was currently living with a man. Now, I don't know what culture you're from, but that's not like a good track record in any culture. And she felt like a nobody. And so she came out in a conversation, and first of all, a man speaking to a woman. Wow, that's odd. A Jew speaking to a Samaritan, that's really odd. In other words, she knew in those cultures, I don't measure up, I don't measure up. And Jesus turns to her, he said, if you knew who I was, you would ask of me, and I would give you living water, eternal life, so you wouldn't have to come back here. He didn't say, if you knew who I was, you better go clean up your act tomorrow, honey. It's not the message. See, she was running away from God, and then the conversation gets spiritual there. It's in John chapter 4, and she goes, well, you Jews say we're to worship on this mountain. We say this, and then there's this amazing moment where Jesus cuts through it all. And he says, the Father, forget the mountains, forget religion. The Father is seeking, and the word in Greek is pursuing, running after. It's where I think the classic author got that poem of the Hound of Heaven. The Father is seeking or pursuing those who would worship him in spirit and truth. See, God's pursuing you. He's after you. But he's after you to give you direction that's best for you. He's after you because he wants to forgive you and realign you and let you know that he does have a plan, and it is a great plan. It might be different than yours. And so we have a picture here of a God who knows you, who says, I understand you. You're not a nobody. And we have a God who's pursuing you, who says, you are wanted. You're valuable. I mean, this is trite, but do you remember, this is probably happening like in kindergarten now, but back in my era many years ago, do you remember the very first time, and maybe it was like 5th or 6th grade or junior high, when someone of the opposite sex expressed some interest, and it went something like this. like 4th, 5th, 6th grade. Mary, who knows Jody, who knows Bobby, who knows Dick, told Fred to tell you that Shirley kind of likes you. Remember that? And then you would go to the lunch line, right? You go to the lunch line, and there she is, and you go, she goes, ooh. You remember that feeling? You're made to be wanted. Or I remember when I was always the skinny, small kid with not much brains, and so I always played football or basketball with kids 3, 4, 5 years older, and I was in your classic suburbs where, yard, driveway, yard, touchdowns are here, and we played tackle football. It was very stupid. I broke a lot of bones. But I wanted to be a part so badly, and I think these older guys saw that, they'd throw passes, and I would dive for them on the concrete, tackle guys on the concrete. It didn't matter. I just wanted to be a part. And so, they would choose up sides, and okay, da-da-da-da-da. Okay, Ingram, we can use you, last man, right? You're 11 and they're 15. And then I can still remember, maybe the first time, oh, I'll take him. And there's still like 3 or 4 like big guys left. And some guy said, I'll take the skinny guy. Ingram, you're on our team. Me? I'm not the last. Me? Yeah. Can I tell you that little sense of, wow, that's how God feels about you. If he was choosing teams, he'd choose you. He's for you. He loves you. He understands you. He knows everything about you. Here's what's wild. He knows everything about you and still wants you. Really? The people that really know a lot about you, right? In part, the reason that we pose, the reason we project, the reason we have these sort of social holograms that really try and let people know I'm better than, I'm more holy than, I'm kinder than, I'm caring than, I know so-and-so. We all do it. Because down deep in your heart and my heart, you feel like if someone saw all that you were, there's no way they could really like you, let alone want you. And God says, I love you. And you got to ask yourself why. When Jesus wants people to understand the fatherhood of God, why does he have this picture of this father that goes out each day seeking this prodigal? Come back, come back. And the moment he even starts this direction, the father runs and meets him. Why does the New Testament letters talk about the children of God as those that are chosen, holy, and dearly loved? Why would God feel that way about us? David gives us the answer in the very next section. He knows you. He's pursuing you. I love that because I need to be pursued because I run a lot. As long as I've known God, I still run. Here's why he loves you so much and why he wants to give you direction and why he wants to help you is that God made you. Think about something that you've made from scratch. Something that you've worked hard on, something that you take pride in, something you say, and whether it's a software program or a cabinet or a car that's restored or you create a song, something that you've made that you go, now that's my best stuff. How do you feel about it? God says, for you created, David speaking, for you, God, created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame, literally my bones is the Hebrew word, or my skeleton, was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, talking about the womb. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body, or literally my embryo. If you got that pen out, circle the word created. Circle the 2 words, knit me. Then go down a line and go, he made your works. Circle works. Next line, I was made, woven together. God made you. And David is saying your innermost being, not just your body, your personality, your DNA, your preferences, not just your eye color, but how you process information, your gifts, your passions. It's not like your life is out here and then God decided to engage in some moment. Oh, I got a 10-year-old, I think I'll engage. Or, you're 23 years old or you're 47 years old. No. Before all time and all eternity, in the womb, the word woven here is a picture of multicolors intricately woven together. You are his workmanship. He was a part of the early process in the womb. Which sperm and which egg would come together uniquely to make you, you. He was involved in the process. You are his masterpiece. Literally, the word, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, put a box around those. They're amazing Hebrew words. It's a picture of literally, are you ready for this? You are awesome in God's sight. You are the pinnacle. God began creation. It's good, it's good, it's good, it's good, it's good, it's good. And then he decided to make us human beings. Let us make mankind in our likeness. It is very good. You can think, you can feel, you can reason, you have self-awareness, you can set goals, you can create, you can change the course of families and communities and life. The very spirit of the living God as a follower of Christ lives inside of you. He knit you together. He made you, and here's what you need to get. You are awesome in God's sight, literally magnificent, amazing. I had a teacher. I thought I was going to be a basketball coach, and I thought I was supposed to be a basketball coach at a major college. And by the way, this is sort of a good lesson. Sometimes God gives us desires to get us to point A, and then to get us to point B, and then to get us to point C. And what we thought is point C is what we're supposed to do, and he really just got us there to get us to point E, D, or F. You're on a journey. But God knows us, and intimately he knows our desires and our passions, and God knew my background. God knew it was coaches that really helped me become a man. I wanted to pass on what they gave me, and I thought, well, I can teach and I can coach, and boy, that's what I want to do because I really want to invest in young men. And so I went to graduate school at West Virginia University. I majored in sports psychology, so you had a number of psychology classes, but it was also then you had biomechanics, physiology, all the hard sciences. And I'll never forget my biomechanics physiology teacher in graduate school. And she had this skeleton, and it was on this, deal, hanging. And then she would come and talk about the human body and almost like put her arm around the skeleton. And she actually named it. I can't remember the name of the skeleton. But then she would talk about, do you understand? And then she would talk like a priestess of the human body. Do you understand what the endocrine system does? Do you understand that inside a cell what mitochondria does and how it stores energy? And are you aware that how the body heals itself? Do you understand that at the right time, as the cells are multiplying, there's built inside of them, and this one starts to build this system, then this system, this system. Do you understand? And she would go, and then she would talk about literally the human body as it's awesome. She said, do you understand that, we take it for granted that a knife comes and cuts here where you get scratched and how the body self-heals on its own, how blood clots occur, when they occur, how they occur, why they occur. And then she would pull this bone out. This was a bone of someone many, many years ago before we could set bones. Do you understand when you have a compound fracture that the body on its own, when the bone is being restored, instead of growing it all the side, all the healing, it'll add bone on this side as the body seeks to make the arm straight again or the leg. And she would talk about the body like, wow. And I thought, you think the body's great? You should meet the one who made it. I mean, think of that. The one who made it. And you know what God says about you? You feel like a nobody? You can take other people's evaluation or you can take God's. He says you are awesome, you are precious, you are magnificent. See, the reason we get discouraged, remember, perception always determines response. You're living in a world like going to Santa Cruz. Remember, the house that has all the mirrors, or during Halloween you can go and you get in front of one big mirror and go, oh, I weigh 900 pounds, right? Or you get into another mirror and go, ooh, I'm the skinniest guy in the whole world. Or you get into another mirror and my head's this big and my body's this, right? You're living in a world where people say, if you have that, or if you look like that, or if you have this job, or if you ever go public, or if your kid gets on the traveling team, or, oh, you've got to be in shape. If you've got a hard body, if you got a purse that looks like this, you drive a car that has that decal. Mirror, 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 mirror. That makes you a someone. And you can spend your whole life chasing false mirrors. And a big part of the population never measures up, and they never hit the false mirrors, and they feel like a nobody. And then I've hung out with the people that have hit the false mirrors, and they're way more discouraged than most of us. Because it's like, wow, if I ever made it to NFL, I made it. I'm empty. Boy, if I ever went public, I've done it twice. I've done 3 turnarounds. I have hundreds of millions of dollars. I got a family that's fractured. I got a kid that doesn't talk to me. I feel lonely. I'm depressed. I drink way too much wine. I take prescription drugs. And Chip, tell me more about this Jesus, because my life isn't working. That's the world we're living in. Here's the evaluation. The mirror. In fact, God calls this the mirror of his word. And God says, it doesn't matter what other people think. It doesn't matter what media says. It doesn't matter what culture says. Here's what he says. I made you. You're my Rembrandt. You're my masterpiece. You're my sculpture, David. I know you. I understand you. I'm pursuing you because I made you. And then he's going to go on to say, and I have a plan for you. I got a plan for you. I didn't just make you. I have a plan for you. But it requires that you get an accurate view of yourself. In fact, I married a woman who believed a lot of bad mirrors from her childhood, who believed a lot of bad mirrors about getting rejected and hurt and left and abandoned. And I watched her literally for 20 years write down on cards what was true about her, and she taught a little series called Precious in His Sight. I think we might have it up in the bookstore. But it was after 20 years. And I married a woman that, okay, I'm prejudiced, okay? I know she's smart. I know she's beautiful. She's an amazing mom. And she looked in the mirror every day and didn't like herself. And you know, when you don't like yourself, it's hard to receive love. And so you keep trying to prove you're okay some way, somehow. And I watched her write these things on little cards about Psalm 139 and who she is and how God made her. And I literally watched this flower bloom. And I want you to know, trying hard to get the right perspective of yourself will not work. Renewing your mind. It's like what you heard last week. I mean, how does a man lose his wife and 4 kids and come and stand before us genuinely after 10 years and say, God is good? When I watched the video, what I saw over and over was he was getting his perspective about himself, the future, his past, and his life from a God who says, I'm in control and I love you, and in a fallen world, bad things happen, but you're precious to me. Do you believe that about you? You're precious. You really are awesome from God's perspective because he made you. But that's not all. He says, I didn't make you just to be. You're not like something he wants to put on a mantle. He says, I got a plan for you. God has a plan for your life. David would go on to say, all the days ordained for me or planned out for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious are your thoughts, O God? How vast is the sum of them? Were I to count them, speaking of God's thoughts about him, if I were to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. And then sort of this parenthetical, when I awake, I'm still with you. And he begins to hint at, you know, in dark times, even if I died, when I awake, resurrection. You have a plan for this life. You have a plan forever and ever and ever. Now think of this. God says, all the days ordained for you. Now grammatically, this could mean he knows the day you're going to die. Of course, God is all-knowing. But probably better in the context, it's the idea of all the days ordained for you written in your book, the details and the plans and the purpose, he already knows. And what the Spirit of God is doing through people and his word is he has these plans for you that you're uniquely made for. That when you discover what they are, get aligned with people in community at this job, with these people, with this person, at this time, then what you've been dreaming about, you flourish. And you don't have to compare yourself with this person or that person. You don't have to look like them. You don't have to have as much or as little money. You don't have to drive a certain kind of car. You don't have to have a certain body type. Because what you begin to understand is I'm doing what God made me to do, and the mirror I'm looking at is his mirror of me. And you know, the biggest issue in all of our relationships is our desperate insecurity. And our desperate insecurity causes us to pose, to manipulate, to manage, and to blame. And that's why if you go to any coffee shop and sit quietly and listen, most of the conversations are two people talking about something else or something that happened to them that is unfair and how bad it was, and they feel better telling one another. And that's sad. And so we sort of manage and diagnose and work through, you know, my husband doesn't really come through for me, or my wife isn't very affectionate, or my kids are doing this, and my boss is a jerk, and this is unfair and that is unfair, as opposed to understanding you are a vital part of God's plan. You are a vital part of God's plan. He has a purpose for your life. He's a good God, and he has a good purpose. Now think of this. You know, I don't know about you, but I have 4 grown kids, and you know, their lives are very full. But when one of my kids texts me and says, "Hey, Dad, just thinking of you today," feels good. Yeah, just on that day, you know, they're thinking about me. Or what happened last week, someone actually, this is a very old-fashioned thing, but it was really kind of cool. Someone wrote out a note. It was on paper. And it said something really complimentary and very specific about me, and it was from someone I knew. And I read that. Then I read it again. I don't want to confess that I read it again, but I did. Why? Until we die, you know what you always struggle with? Does anyone really understand me? Does anyone ever really want me for me? Do I really have a purpose? I mean, and when you get a note from a person or a text from a kid, are you ready for this? Thousands of times each day, the all-knowing, all-powerful God of the universe is thinking about you. Thousands of times. You say, how is that? Because he's not like you. He can think thousands of times concurrently with 7 billion people and not extend one modicum of energy. He's God. That's how big, that's how high, that's how holy. The entire universe is a little thing. All the nations of the world, Isaiah says, it's like a tiny drop on the side of a bucket. He's a big God. He's a holy God. He's a powerful God. He's an all-knowing God. He's an ever-present God. But he's a personal, intimate God who has a plan for you, who has his hand upon you to guide you, who wants to hold you by the hand, who wants to align his purposes with your purposes. Here's the challenge. In a fallen, evil world, we all kind of want to go our own way. And our own way produces barriers and pain. And so David looks finally at the struggles of being understood and loved and wanted, but how difficult it is. And he says, God's world is warped with wickedness. I mean, he gets this sense of, wow, I am a somebody. I am going somewhere. But a prophet poured some oil and said, you're going to be the king. And for 10 years, he's hiding in caves and people trying to kill him. And he's thinking, I'm a nobody going nowhere. And then he saw this wickedness. He said, if only you would slay the wicked, O God. Away from me, you bloodthirsty men. They speak of you with evil intent. Your adversaries, they misuse your name. And then there's this kind of statement. He starts aligning. This is the warrior, king, David, psalmist, musician. And he looks at the world. In his world, it wasn't ISIS. In his world, it wasn't Boko Haram. In his world, it wasn't the sex trade. In his world, it wasn't abused kids. But it was all those kind of things happening. And he says, I hate those who hate you. It wasn't a statement of pride. It was a statement of zeal. I'm going to align my life with the purposes of God and the righteousness of God. He says, I hate those who hate you. Oh, Lord, I abhor those who rise up against you. I have nothing to do but hatred for them. I count them as my enemies. Now, those are strong words, and it's kind of abrupt, but he sees who God is and his purposes and his love. And you know what? I'm sure in his heart of hearts, he longs for people to repent and turn to Christ. But he also, like it's our day, man, I want people from ISIS. I want the people that are taking chainsaws and cutting off children's head. I want people that are putting a gun in 7- and 8-year-olds, and here's the option. You shoot these 3 people or we shoot you. And at 7 or 8, bam, bam, bam. What in the world is happening to the wickedness in our day? And David steps up and says, I'm aligning with you and I want to make a difference. It's his zeal and his loyalty to God. And he's aware evil is very, very real. And it's only those people who understand that they're loved, that they don't have to try and become a someone or chase some false mirror that make a difference. And then I love his honesty. The very last line is not about the wickedness out there, it's about also the wickedness in him. And so he prays, search me, O God, and know my heart. Remember how this psalm started? You search me and know me. God, he knows everything. But instead of running now, he goes, okay, God, search me and know my heart. Test me. And know my anxious thoughts, literally thoughts here, my misgivings. Where I'm off. See if there's any offensive way or literally wicked way. The Hebrew word, see if there's any, literally it's the way of pain. Is there any way of pain? Am I giving you pain? Am I bringing me pain? Is there pain in my home? Is there pain in my work? Is there pain with my kids? Pain with my roommate? Show me my part. Evil's everywhere, even in me. And then he says, lead me in the everlasting way. And it goes right back to Jesus. You know, Jesus said there's a very narrow path, everlasting way, and there's a very broad one, way of pain. And often God uses when we're in the pain, someone abandons us, someone abuses us, we lose our job, cancer arrives at the door, a drunk driver takes out someone's dad, and we can go the way of pain, eating disorder, sexual addictions, workaholism, or we can go the narrow path and say, God, I want to find you. And God says, that's good because I've been looking for you. Welcome home.